Alright, this is pt02 and this is part 2 of the Master Grade XS Gundam re-review. And in this part we're going to go over articulation. And I think I've finally got a decent way of setting my camera up. Since XS is so big, I had to really back the camera up away from the model kit. Otherwise you'd just be looking at his crotch like you were at the beginning of part 1. So, let's go ahead and get started because this might take a while. First, before I get into his main articulation, I'll go over these propellant tanks because I'm going to remove them. They are mounted on these little, I don't even know what to call them. They're just like little fin connectors that come off the bottom of the shoulder armor. And those things can rotate. They could go 360, but obviously this propellant tank's not going to go 360. And they can tilt up and down slightly, and it's just connected with a little slide connector down here. It's just a little peg that goes into a hole, and really that thing's just for the transformation, so I'll go over that when I actually get to the transformation. So let me just remove this one, and that will free up a lot of XS Gundam's maneuverability. Okay, so starting with the head, it's on a single ball joint, so it can go up and down, side to side a little bit. 360-degree rotation is not going to happen. In fact, it can only rotate about that far to each side, just because of the shape of his head and neck. Although, there is a little bit of action with the V-fin. You can pull the V-fin out, and the little incom can come out of his forehead, and this is basically a little wire-guided beam weapon. Think of it as like a funnel on a wire, and it just fires at the enemies. These other ones in the knees are a little bit different. I'll explain those when I get to them. Let's put this back in here, or attempt to anyway. Won't go back in. Okay, there we go. Alright. For the torso, there's really not any articulation in the torso because of his transformation. Although, if you take off the eye field generator from his chest, whoops, I just took the cockpit hatch with it. This big white piece that was on his chest is an eye field generator, I believe. Or maybe it's in his crotch, I can't remember. But anyway, underneath that is a red cockpit hatch, which doesn't want to go back on. This isn't the most user-friendly Master Grade Bandai's made, but it just has to make up for it in size and good looks. Anyway, the cockpit hatch does open, although the crotch piece does kind of get in the way. So let's put that back on. The shoulders are, I can't remember if they're, no, it's just got like a little swivel joint inside the torso, so they can go forward and back. And then they can't go, they don't have any up and down movement, but they can rotate. Unfortunately, because of all this big bulky armor, my hand was in the way that whole time. Unfortunately, because of all this big bulky armor, they can't go 360. So you're going to get about that far forwards, and then only about that far backwards. But one of the cool things is that the arm is attached up to the shoulder armor on a ball joint, so it can actually wiggle around quite a bit inside the shoulder. And you've got rotation below the shoulder. You've got double jointed elbows, and they can bend just about a full 180, about as close to a 180 as you can get with this giant bulky shoulder. And you've got another point of articulation at the wrist, which lets it move forward and back. I don't know if you can quite see that, but it is going a little bit. And then the wrists themselves are on a ball joint so they can rotate and wiggle. The thumb is on a ball joint, and then the fingers are on a hinge with the index finger being separate from the other three. So we've got these little fins on top of the shoulders, which are connected with a ball joint at the shoulder, and then they've got a pivot point at the fin, and then they can rotate right here. This little fin slides out and rotates around, but really that's more for the transformation, which I'll go over later. The skirt armor is kind of minimal. There's not, I guess you could call this a front skirt, but it really doesn't do anything. It just sits there. Basically, it's just a mount for the beam smart gun. The side skirts are pretty much the same ones that you would see on Zeta Gundam. They're beam cannons, and they can come out pretty far actually and go back in, and they can rotate and pull them out, and they can rotate, and you can point these things pretty much anywhere you would possibly need to. So pretty good articulation for the side skirts. The hips are on a peg system. They're not on a ball joint. So the legs can go up about 90 degrees to the body, and they can go back until they hit those giant thrusters on the back of the mobile suit. And if you move the arms and the side skirts out of the way, they can actually go out only about that far. So that's actually not as far as I expected, but anyway, let me fix this side skirt. There we go. There is rotation, not below the hip, but right above the knee, right here, there's rotation. If you move the side skirt, the leg could go 360 if this stand wasn't in the way. This, part of the ankle armor fell off. Put that back on. The knee armor can move up and down. And move this arm. And it's actually got a little bit of posability in it. In the top of the knee, see, this flips out, and there's your beam saber. And of course he's got one in each knee. And then at the bottom, this little piece unclamps, and you've got these larger incoms. And these are a bit different than the one in the forehead. These incoms, the XS Gundam would take its beam smart gun, and these would be, floating out in space somewhere during battle. The XS Gundam could fire its beam smart gun at this incom. It would absorb the shot, turn, and fire that shot at an enemy, so that you could hit your enemies at unexpected angles, or if you couldn't quite see the enemy and had to fire from around a corner, you could do that with these larger incoms in the knees. So anyway, speaking of knees, the knees unfortunately are only going to bend about like that, a little bit less than 90 degrees, because of this big bulky armor on the lower leg. And this armor on the front of the leg can go up and down and move a little bit, but not very much. And let me move the camera down so we can get the feet. The ankle armor can move forward and back, and here's that piece that just fell off a minute ago. Then the feet themselves are actually on a peg. They're not on a ball joint, so they can rotate a bit as far as the ankle armor will let them. They can go up pretty far actually, and they can point down pretty far as well. And the feet don't really have any movement in them as far as bending movement, but the heel slides forward and back. But again, that's really more for the transformation than the actual mobile suit. And let's rotate back here to the back. while we still have a little bit of time. And these giant boosters on the backpack have 2 beam cannons on each one for a total of 4, and they are on ball joints so they can rotate until they hit each other, and they can wiggle a little bit as well. You've got these big flaps right here covering the thrusters, and they're on pegs so they can go up and down and move side to side a little bit. And the thrusters themselves are enormous. I think they're the biggest thrusters I've ever seen on a Gundam model kit. But they're on just kind of, it's not really a peg, they're just kind of socketed in there. So they can't really move at all. The stabilizer on the back can go up. And I think that's about it for articulation. So come back for part 3 and we'll go over XS Gundam's transformation.